They were kind to you. Genuinely, consistently, quietly kind. They texted when they said they would. They showed up when they promised. They did not disappear for days and then reappear with an explanation that somehow made you feel like the problem. They did not say something cutting and then laugh and tell you that you were too sensitive. They did not make you feel like you were constantly auditioning for a role you were never quite good enough to get. They were just there, steady, present, safe. And instead of feeling grateful, you felt nothing, or worse than nothing. You felt uncomfortable, suspicious, quietly, inexplicably restless in a way you could not name. Like something was missing. Like the relationship was somehow too easy, too calm, too predictable. Like the absence of chaos meant the absence of passion. Like the absence of anxiety meant the absence of love. And then you did something that you are probably ashamed of. You pushed them away. Or you stayed, but you kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. You kept testing them. You kept waiting for the moment they would reveal themselves to be what you were used to. You kept a part of yourself held back, protected, unreachable, because some deep and ancient part of you did not believe that what they were showing you was real, that it could last, that you deserved it. And you looked at yourself in the mirror and asked a question that broke your own heart a little. Why can I not just let someone love me? I need you to hear something before we go any further. What you experienced is not a personal failing. It is not evidence that you are too damaged to love or be loved. It is not proof that what happened to you has broken something in you that cannot be repaired. What you experienced is one of the most documented, most predictable, most universal consequences of surviving narcissistic abuse. And it has a name. It has a neuroscientific explanation. It has reasons that are so rational, so logical, so deeply human, that by the time I finish explaining them to you, the shame around what you felt will begin to dissolve. Because here is the truth that nobody tells survivors when they finally get out and try to open their hearts again. Healthy love does not feel like love at first, not after what you have been through. It feels like something is missing. Because what is missing is the anxiety, the unpredictability, the neurochemical storm that your brain learned to call love. And when that is gone, when love arrives quietly and steadily and without the chaos, your nervous system looks at it and says this is not what love feels like. And it is wrong, but it does not know it is wrong yet. And today we are going to change that. Before we go further, I want to plant 4 questions in your mind. Questions that belong to everyone who has ever tried to love someone after narcissistic abuse and found themselves confused by what they felt. Why does a kind, stable, genuinely loving person feel less exciting than someone who hurt me? Why do I keep waiting for something to go wrong even when everything is going right? Why does part of me want to push away the very person who is treating me the way I always said I wanted to be treated? And the question underneath all of the others, am I too broken to have a healthy relationship? Hold every one of those questions. Every single one will be answered before this video ends. And the answer to that last one, the one you are most afraid to ask out loud, is going to be the most important thing I say today. Now I need to tell you about something that happens in the brain during and after narcissistic abuse that most people never learn about. Something that explains everything you have felt when you have tried to love someone safe. Something that removes the shame from the confusion and replaces it with something far more useful. Understanding. Your brain, over the course of your relationship with a narcissist, underwent a process called traumatic bonding reinforcement. This is not a metaphor. This is a literal neurological process in which the brain's reward and threat systems become entangled with a specific person in a way that reshapes what the brain expects love to feel like. Here is how it happened. In the early phase of the relationship, the love bombing phase, your brain experienced one of the most intense neurochemical floods it had ever known. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of them together, in concentrations that the brain does not typically produce in ordinary life. The experience of being loved by a narcissist in that initial phase is, neurochemically, one of the most powerful experiences the human brain can have. And then the devaluation began. The warmth became unpredictable. Sometimes it was there, and sometimes it was not. The praise was replaced intermittently with criticism. The closeness cycled through distance. The safety became anxiety. And here is what the brain did with that shift. It did not simply register the relationship as bad and begin to disengage. It adapted. It wired the anxiety and the dopamine together. It learned that the feeling of relief, the flood of reward chemicals that came when warmth returned after coldness, was one of the most powerful emotional experiences available in this relationship. And because the brain is a reward-seeking organ, it began to crave not just the warmth but the whole cycle, the tension and the relief, the coldness and the reconnection, the anxiety of not knowing and the flood of chemicals that came when the uncertainty resolved in your favor. The anxiety itself became part of the reward, not because you wanted to suffer, because your brain had learned that suffering was the path to the most intense version of the reward it had come to depend on. And this rewiring, this entanglement of anxiety and love, of threat and dopamine, of fear and attachment, is what you carry with you when you leave the relationship and try to open your heart to someone new. Because when someone new arrives and they are kind and stable and consistent, your brain does a comparison. And the comparison is not conscious. It is not rational. It is not the part of you that reads articles and goes to therapy and knows intellectually what a healthy relationship looks like. The comparison happens in the oldest, deepest, most primitive part of your brain. The part that learned what love feels like not through reading or reflection, but through direct, repeated, neurochemical experience. And what that part of your brain concludes is this: this does not feel the same. The anxiety is not here. The hypervigilance is not here. The cycle of tension and relief is not here. The intensity is not here. The feeling of having to earn this person's warmth is not here. And because your brain learned love through all of those things, it reads their absence not as peace. It reads their absence as a lack of love. This is why the kind person feels boring, why the stable relationship feels flat, why the partner who is consistently warm produces not gratitude but a quiet restlessness that you cannot explain. Your brain is not recognizing love. It is recognizing the absence of the neurochemical pattern it learned to call love. And until that neurological wiring is updated, until your brain has enough new, consistent, safe experience to begin to form a new template for what love feels like, the kind person will continue to feel less compelling than the person who hurt you. Not because you do not deserve kindness, because your brain has not yet learned to recognize kindness as love. Now I want to talk about something that lives alongside the neurological rewiring. Something that operates not in the brain's chemistry but in the body's memory. Because narcissistic abuse is not just a psychological experience, it is a physical one. The months or years you spent in a constant state of low-level threat, walking on eggshells, monitoring moods, bracing for the next shift in emotional weather, were not just emotionally exhausting, they were physically registered. Your nervous system was in a chronic state of activation during that relationship. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormone, were elevated for extended periods. Your body learned to exist in a state of readiness that never fully relaxed. The hypervigilance that you developed was not just a mental habit. It was a physical state that your body maintained around the clock. And bodies remember what they have lived. When you enter a new relationship, a genuinely safe one, your body does not immediately know that it is safe. It waits, it scans, it looks for the familiar signals that danger might be coming. It watches for the shift in tone, the withdrawal of warmth, the moment of coldness that would trigger the familiar cycle of anxiety and striving and relief. And when those signals do not come, your body does not relax. It becomes more vigilant. Because in the nervous system's experience, the absence of threat signals is not proof of safety. It is proof that the threat has not yet been detected. This is why you keep waiting for something to go wrong, even when everything is going right. Why you keep expecting the other shoe to drop. Why a relationship that is going well produces not peace, but a subtle, persistent anxiety that is almost harder to bear than the overt anxiety of the previous relationship. Because at least the overt anxiety was familiar. At least you knew what you were dealing with. At least the threat was identifiable. This quiet safety is unfamiliar. And unfamiliar to a nervous system that has been through what yours has feels suspicious. This is not permanent. This is not who you are forever. This is a nervous system doing what nervous systems do when they have been through something genuinely hard. It takes time to trust the safety. But the safety has to be there consistently, patient, steady, unwavering, while the nervous system does the slow, difficult work of updating what it expects. And the kind, stable, consistent person who is loving you right now, they are the environment in which that updating can happen, if you let them be. Now let us talk about something that is perhaps the most painful aspect of trying to love after narcissistic abuse. Something that goes even deeper than the neurological rewiring and the nervous system's vigilance. The grief. Because opening your heart to someone new after narcissistic abuse does not just bring up feelings about them, it brings up everything. Every time the new person is kind to you in a way that the previous person never was, a part of you grieves the kindness you did not get when you needed it most. Every time they show up consistently, a part of you mourns all the times someone did not. Every time they make you feel safe, a part of you processes the loss of all the years you spent feeling unsafe with someone who should have been your safety. Healthy love in the beginning is one of the most grief-saturated experiences that a narcissistic abuse survivor can have. And this grief is confusing because it does not look like grief. It does not feel like sadness in the way that sadness usually presents. It presents as discomfort, as restlessness, as the inexplicable feeling that something is wrong even when objectively nothing is wrong, as the impulse to pull back from someone who is offering exactly what you always said you wanted. Because what you are pulling back from is not just them. You are pulling back from the feeling of being given something you deserved all along and did not get. And that feeling, the feeling of receiving what you should always have had, can be more overwhelming than the feeling of being denied it. Because being denied it was familiar. Being given it means confronting the full weight of what you were denied. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse unconsciously avoid this confrontation by keeping safe people at arm's length. By creating distance before the closeness can bring up the grief. By manufacturing problems in healthy relationships because the problems are easier to manage than the profound, complicated emotion of being finally genuinely loved. This is not self-destruction. This is self-protection from a grief that you are not yet ready to feel. And the work, the deep, patient, compassionate work, is slowly becoming ready, slowly letting the safe person in far enough for the grief to arise, and then staying through the grief, through the discomfort, through the impulse to run, through the unfamiliarity of being loved without conditions, without the cycle, without having to earn each moment of warmth, staying until the grief passes and what is left is something new, something quiet and solid and nothing like what you had before. Something that your nervous system will eventually, not quickly, but eventually, begin to recognize as what love was always supposed to feel like. Now I want to talk about something that many survivors experience that is almost never discussed openly. The comparison. Even when you are with someone genuinely good, even when you know intellectually that what you had before was not love, a part of you compares. You compare the intensity. The new relationship feels calmer, and the old one felt more alive. And even though you know the aliveness was actually anxiety, a part of you misses it. You compare the certainty. The new person loves you clearly and consistently, and even though this should be reassuring, a part of you finds it less compelling than the uncertainty that kept you perpetually engaged. You compare the way you feel about yourself in each relationship, and you notice that the new person's consistent kindness does not produce the same rush of relief that the narcissist's occasional kindness produced. And you wonder if this means you loved the narcissist more. You did not. You were more addicted to the narcissist. And addiction and love are not the same thing even when they feel identical from the inside. The intensity you felt with the narcissist was not the depth of love. It was the depth of the neurochemical dependency. The relief you felt when they were kind was not joy. It was the temporary resolution of anxiety that they created specifically to be resolved by their approval. The aliveness you felt in that relationship was not passion. It was hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is exhausting. It is damaging. It is the body's emergency system running continuously in a situation that should never have required it. What the new relationship offers is not the absence of love. It is the presence of love without the emergency. And learning to recognize that, learning to feel the quiet, steady, unglamorous reality of being genuinely loved and recognize it as the more valuable thing, is one of the most important recalibrations that recovery requires. Now I want to address something directly that many survivors feel but almost nobody says out loud. Sometimes in a healthy relationship you do things that you later cannot explain. You pick a fight when there was nothing to fight about. You create distance when closeness was being offered. You say something designed, almost unconsciously, to test whether this person will leave. To push them to the edge of what they will tolerate so you can see whether they will stay. You are not trying to destroy the relationship. You are trying to find out if it is real. Because in your experience, love that does not survive pressure was not real love. Love that disappeared when you needed it most was the template. Love that stayed through difficulty, love that was tested and held, was the only love that could be trusted. And so you test, not consciously, not cruelly, but genuinely, desperately, from the most frightened and most hopeful part of you. You test because you need to know before you let yourself fully trust that this is safe. And when the person passes the test, when they do not leave, do not withdraw, do not punish you for being difficult, the part of you that was testing watches that response with a mixture of relief and confusion, and something that might be the very beginning of genuine trust. Each past test is a data point. Each data point is a brick in the new foundation. Your nervous system is slowly, reluctantly, necessarily building. You are not sabotaging the relationship. You are building the evidence base that your traumatized nervous system requires before it will allow you to believe that something good might actually be safe. And the person who stays through that process? Who passes the tests without even knowing they were tests? Who remains patient and warm and consistent while you work through the layers of what was done to you before them? That person is doing something extraordinary. They are giving your nervous system the evidence it needs to write a new story about what love is allowed to feel like. Now I promised you 4 answers. Here they are. The first question was, why does a kind, stable, genuinely loving person feel less exciting than someone who hurt me? Because your brain was rewired by the narcissistic relationship to associate love with the cycle of tension and relief. The anxiety of the narcissistic relationship triggered the same neurological systems as excitement because both involve elevated arousal, heightened attention, and the anticipation of reward. When that cycle is absent, when love arrives without the tension, without the unpredictability, without the anxiety, your brain reads the absence of arousal as the absence of passion. It is not. It is the absence of danger. And your brain has not yet learned that those are different things. The kind person does not feel less exciting because you love them less. They feel less exciting because they are not producing the emergency response that your brain learned to mistake for love. That distinction is the beginning of your healing. The second question was, why do you keep waiting for something to go wrong even when everything is going right? Because your nervous system was conditioned by prolonged exposure to unpredictable threat to treat calm as a temporary state and danger as the inevitable return. When you spent months or years in a relationship where safety was always followed by threat, your nervous system updated its model of reality to include threat as the default and safety as the temporary exception. Now, when you are in a situation of genuine sustained safety, your nervous system does not relax. It prepares, it waits, it scans for what must be coming. Not because you are pessimistic or damaged, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do. Waiting for the thing that in the previous relationship always came. It is not broken, it is accurate to its training, and it will take consistent, repeated, extended experience of safety before it begins to revise that training. The third question was, why do you want to push away the very person who is treating you the way you always said you wanted to be treated? Because being treated well when you have been conditioned to believe you must earn every crumb of warmth produces a profound and disorienting cognitive dissonance. If you have to earn love, then freely given love feels wrong, unearned, suspicious, like there must be something you are missing, like the price has not been named yet. And so you push away not because you do not want what is being offered, but because you cannot yet believe that it is being offered without a cost. The pushing away is also grief in disguise. Being loved well reminds you of every time you were not, and that reminder is painful in a way that is easier to avoid than to feel. Pushing the safe person away delays the grief. Letting them in makes it unavoidable, and the work, the brave, necessary work, is letting it in anyway. The fourth question, the one you were most afraid to ask, am I too broken to have a healthy relationship? No. You are not too broken. You are not broken at all. You are recalibrating. You are a nervous system that learned a very specific and very damaging definition of love, trying to unlearn it in real time, while also living the life that was disrupted by what you went through. That is not brokenness. That is one of the hardest things a human being can do. The people who cannot have healthy relationships after narcissistic abuse are not the ones who feel what you feel. They are the ones who never examine it, who never ask the question, who never sit with the discomfort long enough to understand what it is telling them. You are here. You are asking. You are trying to understand. That is not what broken looks like. That is what healing looks like. And healing, however slow and uncomfortable and confusing it is, always moves in one direction, toward the life that was taken from you, toward the love that you always deserved. toward the version of yourself that knows the difference between a storm and a home and will never again mistake one for the other. Let me leave you with this. Somewhere right now there is a version of you that has done this work, that has sat in the discomfort of being loved safely and stayed long enough for the nervous system to update, that has cried the grief that healthy love brought up and felt it pass, that has tested the kind person and watched them pass and slowly, reluctantly, miraculously begun to trust. That has learned, not through reading or understanding, but through living and feeling and surviving the process, that love does not have to hurt to be real. That version of you exists. It is not far away. It is on the other side of the discomfort you are feeling right now, and the path to it is not around the feeling. It is through it. Stay. Stay with the kind person. Stay through the testing. Stay through the grief. Stay through the restlessness and the comparison and the inexplicable impulse to run from the very thing you always needed. Stay until your nervous system learns what your mind already knows, that this is what love was supposed to feel like all along. Subscribe to this channel because every week we go deeper into the psychology of loving after loss, healing after narcissistic abuse, and finding your way back to the person you were always meant to be. And remember this, healthy love, feeling wrong at first, does not mean it is wrong. It means your nervous system has not yet caught up with what your heart already knows. Give it time. Give it patience. Give it the chance to learn something new. You deserve a love that does not require you to suffer for it. And it is closer than you think.